Rick, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing okay, Keith.
Dude, I'm a little nervous about this topic that that you think we should talk about here.
I think it's an important topic, and I think it's really good for two men who are a little older, you about to be 49 and me 70, about to be 70, to talk about the Me Too movement and what we've observed as sort of collateral folks on the sidelines looking at it, and also how it's affected our loved ones, mothers, sisters, daughters. And just share a little bit with the audience about some of our thoughts about it.
Okay, let's do that. And the title of our show is?
Me Too.
Okay, let's do it.
I want to start by asking you a question.
Okay.
Okay, so when we're dealing with gender issues, is it important for you to first begin with the notion that you have to have had a female experience before you can even interpret it? Or are you in a different place?
You know, I'm in a very different place than I was, man, even 6 months ago. I began taking a psychology class over at ASU in the pursuit of a bachelor's degree in psychology. And the first class I took was Psych 385, and that is the psychology of gender. And how I saw gender before is much different than I see it now. I saw two dominant genders, female and male. And in going through this class, the instructor asked us to keep an open mind. And because I try to practice that, I went into the class with an open mind, and it really changed how I see gender. I see male and female more as the body parts that you're born with, as your sex at birth, and I see gender as, how you identify. And that has been an education for me. And some people identify lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or they identify as non-binary. They want no labels at all. And so I've really come to a completely different place. I would not have had that kind of openness before this class, and that's sent me down a road in which I've talked to people who see it the traditional way, and I've talked to a lot of people that see it with is what you identify with, and it's your choice. So it's been an evolution for me.
Yeah, good. Well, that's good though. Evolution is important because it implies a change, and usually change that creates greater adaptivity and more likelihood for survival of the species. And I think those are two wonderful things to go forward with. Open-mindedness, in my judgment, always does that for us.
Absolutely.
So I was going to say that I think there's a big difference between legal equality and cultural equality. I'm taking it from the standpoint of not so much the individual self-identifying or an individual looking at another individual, but looking first at what the law allows. And I think all of us would agree that the law shouldn't discriminate at all between men and women, end of story, or LGBT
yes.
Folks, or gay people. It should be all equal. Culturally, I think there's a schism in the country, and we still, despite the Me Too movement, have people who believe that there ought to be traditional roles and that the genders are basically different, and because of their differences, these traditions have evolved over time. And they are worth keeping, and they are helpful. And there are other people who believe that isn't the case, that we all ought to be, in so many words, indistinguishable from the others. And I guess I feel somewhat in between, except that I would start with the premise that when you're dealing with gender issues, the very first thing you have to say is that we're human beings. We're human beings, first of all. So I identify first as a human. And then I think secondly, I don't even go through this analysis, probably none of us do, but I don't think of myself as a male first. I am having a male experience in a human circumstance, but I'm human first. So when all of these things are happening with women trying to assert themselves and taking what they believe is correctly theirs, and the law does as well, I think that's a step in the right direction. I like that. There does create a problem for men who have been raised traditionally, though, And that's difficult because in a space of a lifetime, from the time when I was a kid in the late 50s and 60s until now, the change has been enormous. So it's difficult for people who are older to understand that or appreciate it.
Right. No, I totally agree with you. And I think any kind of change that is more inclusive, I'm all for it. People having the same kinds of opportunities for equality, I'm all about it. I mean, period. You know, one thing that's happened for me is that I am very sympathetic to the movement, and I just really don't have any judgment about it. You know, you see people that speak up and they say some views that aren't very popular. I don't judge the views, you know. I mean, This is the person who could have been, you know, in their senior years, and that's the environment and the culture that they grew up in, and they just haven't adapted to this changing culture. And I'm not making excuses for them. I'm just not suffering over them being where they are. I'm just holding space for everybody, and we're all just having a human experience. And I want to be treated kindly. I'm extending kindness to everyone else. And so that's kind of informing how whenever I do catch the headlines, which I rarely do, because I don't look at the news because there's a lot of suffering in that. But when I do, you know, hear about this celebrity said this, and you know, this person's career is over, or social media is going after someone, I just really want us to be kind, you know. And there is a way to take intelligent action when it comes to encouraging or activating change on a societal level. And if we can do it with kindness, that's just really the best way. And another thing that's happened with me is the way that I have come to be more open, that's also evolved. I mean, the class was definitely one of the things that helped me from an educational standpoint, from an academic standpoint, to kind of see what it really means about gender identity. But what's also happened has been this transformation about what it takes for me to have empathy for another human being.
Oh, that's a good topic, yeah.
Yeah, you know, because I think the reason that some people may, particularly males, may have an issue with what they perceive as the ferocity in which this change is being, sought after, is because they can't put themselves in other people's shoes, and that's the definition of empathy. And so for me to do it, I had to relate everything back to an African American experience. So I'll give you an example. At a local hospital that I volunteer at, they are really, really mindful and adamant about treating everybody with dignity and consideration so that they can live up to treating the patient first. Like, the only thing that matters first and foremost is the patient. And so there's been a community, particularly the transgender community, that has not been treated with respect or with dignity or accorded the same kind of courtesies that the traditional genders of male and female have been accorded. So they are righting that ship. And the way that they're writing it is going department by department and having face-to-face meetings with people to talk about and educate them.
Wow.
With, this is what you do. You ask them what name would they like to be called by, what pronouns they like to be referred, they like to use when you're speaking with them, and just all those things. And so in one of the scenarios that we're doing, this acting scenario that we're doing, there's a person there who is coming in, and this person identifies as male. And so the nurse who's attending before the procedure is administered needs a urine sample, okay? And so they give the person, the piece of equipment for a urine sample. The person said, I can't use this, the patient, the actor who's playing the patient, I can't use this. And the nurse says, no, you need to use this. No, I can't use this. You don't understand. Mm-hmm. And so she looks at the chart and she says, but you're so-and-so, and it's a male name. It's like, I can't use this. And then she says, well, and the nurse keeps saying, listen, I need to go get the doctor. No, get the doctor. Mm-hmm. I am really a female biologically, mm-hmm. but I identify as a male. And so the nurse is like, I really got to go get the doctor. And the person says, no, do not go get the doctor. And if you have to get the doctor, becomes really agitated. If you have to go get the doctor, at least put an IV in me. Let's get the IV started. And she's like, why do you want to get the IV started? Because I've been here before, years before, and something like this has happened, not at this hospital, but they've had an experience like this. And they said, once we get the IV in me, we've already started a procedure. So once the doctor comes in, you can't turn me away. And I was like, wow, like they're going to go to that extent. And so now, for me to really get the gravity of that moment, that a person is not being treated with kindness, with consideration, with compassion, for me to get that moment, I would have to have traced it back to some kind of situation from my past that I could relate to. So any situation that I would have gone back to was in World War II, when African Americans had fought along their Caucasian brothers and sisters, and they come back from World War II, they fought for their country, and here they are wanting to buy a home for their family. But they would have to give money to one of their Caucasian friends, or they'd have to try to do the whole transaction over the phone without being seen first, so they would not be denied housing. So that's the importance of the Fair Housing Act, so you can't be discriminated against. But I'd have to see that kind of level of discrimination from my own, like, quote unquote, African American community or history for me to be able to relate to someone else in a similar situation, for me to be in their shoes. Now, what I mean by that I evolved in terms of my openness is I don't have to trace it back to being African American first. I can just say it's humanity. It's a human being thing.
That's right.
And that alone says be kind, be open, be compassionate, be empathetic. If one amongst us suffers, we all suffer. And so that's been what's been different about me now, man. It's like I don't need something to help me see it. I'm leading with kindness first and foremost, period.
Yeah, there you go. I think that's the default place that you should always begin as a human being. And I think not only does it help the other person and help the culture in general, but I think it really reflects on who you are. When you have kindness and a loving heart and an open heart inside of you, that is really what comes out, and that is really a reinforcement of what you get more of.
Absolutely.
The more you put out is what you get back. So if you put out hate and disrespect or discrimination, that's what will come back to you in some way. I think one area that is very interesting for me with gender differences is just the kind of experience that females have had that are so wildly different than anything that I could ever experience as a male. One quick example that all the women in the audience will get. It took me a long time to understand why women just wouldn't go out to eat by themselves. I'd go into a bar, I'd sit down, have a burger, have a beer, no big deal. If it's 10 o'clock at night, no problem. Going for a run at 10 o'clock at night, no problem, never gave it a thought. In both of those examples, eating alone or going out by yourself at night to do something athletic, those kinds of things women would have a second thought about. And to me, it just seems like you just take it for granted that it's like no big deal. But again, I'm a white, privileged man, and there's nothing that I have experienced in my life that can compare with what's happened to women, safety issues and ability to be mobile and to do the things that they like. So I've never been in a minority, and I think the Me Too movement is great because it puts people like me on guard. They have to understand that they're forced to have an empathy or compassion that they may not have. The great thing about gender issues, it's different than I think racial issues, is that most of us have a sister, a daughter, we all have mothers.
Right.
And so we can get a little bit of a clue about what their lives have been and become more compassionate and empathetic because of their experiences. I was an only child. I didn't have any sisters. My mother died fairly young. So I didn't really have a good insight into how females thought or what kinds of things they had to deal with. I went through my life blithely without having to consider any of that.
Right.
So I think this whole idea, we had the racial stuff in the 60s, and we're having a lot of gender issues now. I think those are all wonderful things that need to be played out so that we can see that we're at the end of the day, we're all human, and we're all entitled to loving kindness. We're all entitled to have a respect and a consideration as the default mode of interacting.
Yeah, absolutely. I have heard a little bit about, males talk about, the concern with saying or doing the right or wrong thing. And, maybe this is an overshot and it's going too far, the needle is going too far over this way. And what I say to that is, just be kind. You don't have to worry about the needle.
Don't worry about the needle.
You don't have to worry about the needle. You don't have to worry. If you're kind, you got nothing to worry about.
Handle that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also it's important too to be mindful of, just give people, if people are going to change, great. If they want to be inspired by what others are doing and be a part of that change, fantastic. And if they don't, that's cool too. I mean, I'm just not going to suffer along with you. I mean, we were talking off camera, and we were talking about, exactly that, people being afraid of saying the wrong thing or some act that they've done years ago being an issue. If they're still doing the stuff now, that's a concern. They did this years ago, but there's no threat of it, then I think there's something different. And I think it's really important to just be loving and kind and not to confuse behavior with who a person is at their core.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say that there isn't some acts that have to be punished. Absolutely, for sure. But I think just being kind. Like for me being African American, I mean, some 80-year-old dude screams out the window the N-word. The dude's 80. When was he born? Like, I'm not gonna get mad at that.
Yeah.
And if there's some middle school kid that does the same thing, dude, I got bigger fish to fry. I'm not getting out of looking for the kids' parents and stuff like that, and getting on Facebook and making a rant about it. Oh man, my response to all of that, just be kind. I'm just gonna do my part, man, to be kind. It starts with me.
And that's an interesting thing too, the kindness being part of masculinity. Because I think part of what happens with the Me Too movement is that men feel threatened. They feel like their masculinity is being challenged, that they're no longer powerful, they're no longer I don't know, how would you say it? They're no longer considered important or as important as they once were. I don't feel that threat, at the least. If women want to do more things politically, that's fantastic. They have a whole different way of looking at life. They're nurturers, for one thing. They're multitaskers, for another. They're terrific when they're working on a problem. Most of my classmates in law school who got the best grades were women. Right. They're diligent. They work hard. I mean, how can that be a threat to you?
Great collaborators.
Great collaborators. But there are gender differences, and when I'm in discussions like this with my buddies who feel threatened by their masculinity, to me it just seems kind of silly. I mean, we all, as men, we all want to be thought of as powerful and protective or capable and those kinds of things, which is tied up in a role model of a masculine guy. But I'm not interested in the typical kind of push people down so I can be elevated stuff. Right. And I don't think that there isn't a job that the woman that a woman could be prohibited from doing because she lacks the brain power or the disposition. I think that women are amazing, and I think. Well, I'm going too far now, but I still want to be attracted to a woman, and I don't want to lose masculinity. But on the other hand, it doesn't seem to me they don't seem to be related topics like they do for a lot of men. Exactly.
No, they're not a threat to one another, in my opinion. And I've said this, throughout this episode of the podcast, and that is, I just want to be kind, man. And I'm learning so much right now because I'm open on how to be more kind, how to be an ally to every human being. And this show is about gender, so everyone, whatever they identify with, male, female, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, you can just count on me to be kind.
Me too. Yeah, me too. There's no distinction in my judgment between anybody on the planet, whether you're disabled, your skin color is purple. It doesn't matter. If you're a human being, that's the entry fee that you've already paid, and you're equal with the rest of all of us.
Perfect. Rick, thank you, man. Hot topic.
Yeah, we'll get back to it.
All right, man. Thank you.